We've been together these last few weeks, and I can't say it's been great. I'm sorry. I have really tried. It's not me, it's you. I just don't think you're in a place right now where we can have this kind of committed relationship. I'm sorry. I think we should see other goggles. I want to see other goggles, but keep my phone number. Let's stay friends. And then maybe we'll see where life takes us. And down the road, maybe the time will be right. But no, don't cry. It's okay. Like I said, it's not me. It's definitely you. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and today we're going to talk about the Walksnail VRX. Now you've probably seen this thing. Walksnail, what's Walksnail? Well, Walksnail is multiple names. Walksnail is Caddx, Walksnail is also the Avatar system, and it's all a bit confusing jumble of words and phrases to talk about what is essentially the same system. And what the Walksnail VRX is a digital VRX option to go on your analog goggles, similar to what I've got going on here with my Sky Zones. This is the Walksnail VRX, and it allows us to bring a system similar to DJI in that it does packet retransmission, unlike HD0, which just focuses on low latency. The Walksnail and DJI systems focus more on image quality with image retransmission. They chop all the images up, they compress them, and they send them to you. And normally how they send them to you is in the Avatar goggles or the Fat Shark Dominator HDs. But that is if you want to own a dedicated set of goggles for your Avatar system. And not everybody does. Some people want to do like I have, and they want to throw it on their existing analog goggles. And that's what this VRX is for. And some people are throwing it on their HD0 goggles, and that's what this VRX is for. And I want to love it. I want to love it so much because there are some really great things about this system. This system is capable of 1080p, which is higher definition than the DJI V2 systems, what we see out of the Vista and the old school Air Unit with the Goggles V2, that system. It has more image resolution than that. And it basically has the same capabilities outside of that. It can go up to the same transmission amount, so the same milliwatts output. It can do the exact same kinds of things with OSD. It has the capability to record DVR, and this one actually has the capability to record onboard to the VTX, which is pretty darn nice. And one thing this system has over DJI is that you can run it in small things like this 65mm whoop. They have a 1S board that will fit this, but my build for testing is this. It's a 3-inch freestyle quad, and I have the Walksnail Avatar 1S board in it, and that's what I've been testing with. And I want to love it so much because it has so much potential on top of what DJI can do using a very similar technology to what DJI is doing. And this VRX is like $200. So you can buy into the Walksnail system for like $200. You slap an HDMI cord into your HDMI compatible goggles, and suddenly, if you have 1080p compatible goggles, you have 1080p compatible video link. And that sounds really intriguing, and I just want to love it so much, but I can't. I can't love it because about as close to loving it as I can get right now is meh. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's okay, but it's not great. And today we're going to talk about why that is. Now let's kick things off with my number one hot take about this system, and that is the image quality just ain't that good. Now I fly a lot of things. I fly the DJI O3 system, I fly analog, I fly HD0 in many different flavors, and I've flown the DJI V2 system. And I have to say, the DJI V2 system still beats out the Avatar system as far as image quality. Even though the V2 system is capped at 720p, if you use the comparable resolution, the 720p resolution in the Avatar system, it just looks significantly worse. It's just not great. And then you can go up to the 1080p. That's perfectly fine if your goggles are capable of doing that, if you have high resolution full 1080 goggles. But again, it's just not as good as you would expect. And I think a lot of that has to do with the image compression that the Avatar system is using. You see, DJI has been doing this stuff forever, literally forever when it comes to drones. In this time scale of drones, they are kind of like the dinosaurs. They were around for a really long time, only they haven't yet gone extinct, and they may have started as birds, because I think a lot of dinosaurs had feathers, which is pretty weird. I hope people over at DJI don't have feathers. But if they do, I would totally get it, because they are the what's a dinosaur with feathers? That. They are whatever that was of the FPV world when it comes to digital, because they kind of kicked the whole thing off. And they've had the most time to perfect the compression algorithms. Now, if you're wondering about the Avatar system versus the DJI system, they're technically very similar chipsets, because they are purchased from basically the same manufacturer upstream from DJI. They just sold the same thing to the people over at Walksnail. Now, that's not to say that it isn't a whole new system, because it is a whole new system. It's a whole new system software-wise. And the people over at Walksnail have been really trying to figure out how to make it the best they can in software, and there's constant iterative updates. And I think that at some point down the road, we may see the compression get better. They just don't have all of the experience under their belt like DJI does, and the massive amount of dev teams and the massive amount of engineers and money to throw at it like DJI does to get the compression correct. And it's not like Walksnail is reverse engineering the DJI system, because if they were, they could give us an identical clone. And that is not what we see here. They are really doing their own thing. They just haven't got there yet. And this feels more like a beta firmware, even though it's full release firmware. I mean, it's functional. It's fully functional. Well, everything is except audience mode, but it's just not at the same level. So if I was going to pick between the Walksnail system and the DJI V2 system for something other than a micro quad where I don't really have the option for DJI, I would still go with the V2 system. Also, if you're looking at the full-size Walksnail system, it is cheaper to get a RunCam Link and Wasp camera than it is to pick up the full-size Walksnail VTX and camera currently. So a little bit of a deciding factor, but really the first thing is definitely the image quality. And I think in time, maybe that'll be better, but that all adds up to part of my meh feeling about it at the moment. Now, the second hot take that I have about this system is that I didn't measure the latency, and I still don't like it. Yeah, I didn't measure the latency personally. Now, I know a bunch of people have, and I don't intend to measure the latency on this system, partly because I'm super busy and measuring latency is tough. I don't really have the equipment to go up to the level I would like to see the latency measurements at, and other people have kind of already beat this horse to death. This horse is walking around with 3 legs. I'm telling you, it's already on its way out. So I'm not going to measure latency. If you want to see latency measurements, I really recommend the videos from Joshua Bardwell or Chris Rosser that go into more depth with this with better equipment. Even though some of the same methods are used that I would use, I'm not pointing a GoPro with the lens doing 240 FPS because that's not super accurate. What I did instead was go fly the thing, and I flew it on my Sky Zones. And about this system, with the VRX, you are limited to the refresh rate of your analog goggles. Now, the full Avatar goggles have the ability to do a full 100 FPS in the goggles, but you can't use any other systems with those like you can with my Sky Zones. So you're limited here to either the 100 FPS frame rate, which is the low latency mode, or 60 FPS, which is what Sky Zones are limited to, because the HDMI port on Sky Zone goggles limits at 60 FPS. Now, I did also fly this thing on the HD0 goggles, which are currently the only goggles on the market that are capable of the 100 FPS input on the HDMI. So I was able to fly low latency mode with this. And in low latency mode, you are limited to 720p resolution, which, like I said, is not as good as the DJI V2 system. But on regular latency mode in both goggles, I can use 1080p. So I flew both. I flew both of these things. The 720p 100 FPS is okay. It's fine. It's completely doable. I feel like that's comparable to what I usually fly with my Vistas, what I usually fly with my O3 systems, because I use 120 FPS on my goggles V2, and I do fly pretty quickly. Some people would say stupidly. And in that low latency mode, everything is pretty good. Everything's fairly peachy. But the problem with it is, these are the only goggles that can do it, the HD0 goggles. They are the only goggles on the market that aren't the Avatar goggles with the built-in VRX. These are the only ones that you can hang an external VRX on and get 100 FPS. And not everybody has these, and they've been kind of hard to get your hands on, and we're all waiting on pre-orders and various things like that. And until stock really gets to the level where people can just purchase these things from their favorite vendor, it's not a viable option. So we're all left with things like this. The VRX on our Sky Zones or HDO2s, or maybe our Orca goggles. And the problem with all of those is the HDMI input on them is capped at 60 FPS. So that means that we are most likely not in the low latency mode. We are in the standard mode, the standard latency mode, and we can run 1080p or we can run 720p, but we're still limited by the 60 FPS. And in that mode, it really pushes the boundaries of how well I'm able to adjust to the latency. Now, I will say, that's just me. That's not everybody out there. And maybe you're very different and you can adjust to it. But I know lots of pilots who have the same complaint about the system. The 60 FPS mode is nearly unflyable. Now, I flew it and I can fly in it. It is not an enjoyable experience. I feel like I transitioned to it after a few packs, but then suddenly it's just not the same anymore. I don't know what it is. I think it's highly variable. It feels highly variable. I can feel the latency. And in the HD0 goggles, in the the high latency mode, the 60 FPS mode, I actually got a lot of stutters. It almost looked like a flicker book. In fact, there weren't any flights that I could take that I didn't just come right back home and land when I was running with those goggles. Now that may be a firmware thing with the 100 FPS mode because they did have to enable that, and maybe that'll get itself worked out. But even in my Sky Zones, the low latency or the high latency mode was kind of not good. I mean, it wasn't garbage. I could fly, but some people can't fly, and again, it all leads to my meh opinion so far of the Walksnail system. And for the third hot take is this stupid cable. This stupid cable. If you have the Avatar system, you know what this cable is. This is the cable that you plug your VTX into your computer with to do things like firmware updates and to get the video off. Because the VTX does have 8 gigs of onboard recording, which is actually a really nice feature. It's pretty cool to have full 1080p recordings come straight off the VTX without it having to be DVR that came over the air. So you don't have problems with your footage like you do with DVR footage, where if you had breakup, it's in your footage. Instead, it's all on the chip. But the problem is that you have to put this little bitty sucker into a little bitty port on the VTX, and this thing constantly wants to pull out while you have it plugged into your computer because there's no retention clip. And then you have to power the VTX because this doesn't power the VTX. So it gets molten lava hot while it's sitting there transferring everything off. And the transfer speeds, yeah, they're dog slow. So it's going to get molten lava hot for a very long time. And the whole time, you're hoping this little doodad doesn't pop out and ruin your entire transfer and just make your day that much worse. It's a great idea. It's a terrific idea. I get the point. I understand it. It's bad implementation, and I think the implementation is limited by the form factor here. They tried to cram a lot of stuff onto a small board, and there's just not enough room for a full-size USB port, like there is with my DJI O3 system that has onboard recording on SD card or on internal flash. I just plug a USB-C in there, it powers my O3 Air Unit, and we're off to the races, and it doesn't get hot, and I can pull my stuff off. That's not the case with this. Now, I will say, as a comparison to the Vista doesn't have it at all. So you can't do any onboard recording with the Vista like you can with the old school Air Unit, but this is more comparable to the Vista for weight and capability. So it is a one-up on what the Vista is capable of, but I think that the janky implementation just makes it kind of a dog to use. So if you get this, just remember how much you'll probably hate this cable. And if you don't hate this cable, leave me a comment below about why you don't hate it and what you're doing to not hate it. Because either you're just not using it at all, or you've got some kind of tip or trick that I do not know. Because that cable is the bane of my snail walking friggin' existence at the moment. And I know it sounds really, really negative, all the things I just said. And some of them are slightly negative, especially that one. It's legitimately negative. But just let me balance this out by saying, and let me start the balancing by reminding you that I wasn't sent this stuff. This was all purchased with actually money from Patreon. My Patreon supporters actually funded me purchasing this system. So thank you, Patreon supporters. You are the only reason I'm able to do this. And due to those people, I'm able to have these horrendous complaints about the system. But they're not really that horrendous. They're just factual. And the fact of the matter is that this system is evolving. It's still very new in the scope of digital systems. HD0 has been around longer than this. DJI has been around far longer than this. But I will say Walksnail definitely has Orca beat, because Orca showed up to CES with dummy units, and we have yet to see them actually put anything out. I just wanted to jab on Orca there for a second, but I got that in. Anyway, it's not a rib on the system. The Walksnail VRX is actually a really good idea. You get to bring a digital system like DJI to your goggles you already own for the kind of price people can afford. And the implementation of the VRX is identical to the experience you will have in the Avatar goggles, except for the ability to use the 100 FPS mode unless you have the HD0 goggles, or maybe someday SkyZone or Orca will come out with goggles that have 100 FPS capability on the HDMI with the OLED drivers. Today that doesn't exist, and the HD0 goggles are the only ones. But assuming that we get to that point, you can bring this digital system to goggles you already own without buying new goggles for a reasonable price, slap it in your quad, get up in the air, have onboard recording, and full HD capabilities. Now, all the things that I said are still true to life. The resolution is not great. The cable is really, really, really frustrating. And the latency really is there and impactful. But all of those things, except for the cable, are software issues. And I think that Caddx, Walksnail, whatever the heck you want to call them, Quacksnail, what do you get if you mixed Caddx and Walksnail? Would you go with Waddix or Cadsnail or Cavatar? It's the Cavatar system. Caddx Avatar system. Anyway, I digress. Whatever it is, they are still working on the thing a lot, and the devs are after it. And there's firmware updates constantly, and you can flash this VRX pretty easily, and you can flash the VTX pretty easily, and it all has beeper or light feedback. They have done some smart things, like with this VRX, if you accidentally get it in 100 FPS mode and your goggles don't support it, you can hold the back button for 5 seconds, although it took me longer than 5 seconds to get it to work. It was more like 8 or 9, and it will beep at you and then switch modes back to the one that works. They've put a lot of good thought into it. I think that they really have the motivation and the drive to get to a place where the system is a real competitor to the DJI V2 system. Now, you can't compare this with HD0 because it is a totally different beast. And I know I talk about the HD0 goggles, but it is just a different class of thing. The HD0 system does not work in the same way. It is focused on low latency. But what I will say is the 720p mode on the Walksnail system makes me feel like I am flying resolution-wise HD0. It is very similar to HD0's resolution. To me anyway, it's a little bit objective, but let me know in the comments below if you're running it and you feel that way, if you've run HD0 and the Walksnail system, because I feel like the resolution is very similar. I still have a hard time making out branches and things with the Walksnail at 720p. At 1080p, it's really not that much better, to be honest with you, but it feels a lot like the HD0 image quality with more latency. So that's where we're at right now. But at the end of 2023, this may be a completely different discussion. They may have fixed so many things that it is ready to take on DJI and hit the market share. And maybe the prices have come down a little bit and their adoption rate is higher because people are able to put a VRX in their friggin' goggles, whether it's a terrific experience or just a meh experience. It's still an experience they can afford to have with hardware they already own. And that is the brilliance of the Walksnail VRX. And I don't say that because I was paid to say it. I say it because I've been flying it for about a month now, and that's how I actually feel about it. And I look forward to the future of this system, regardless of the complaints I have about it right now. Because if there's anything I know about FPV, it's that it will change. Whatever I'm complaining about right now will be different in a year, and whatever I complain about then won't have been around right now, most likely. But when it comes to flying small things, you really only have the two options, HD0 and Walksnail, because DJI is just flat out, and the option to have a VRX that you can slap onto your existing goggles is a little bit brilliant, whether you like it or not. It's actually a really good way to go, and I wish DJI would do this because they would just sell a bajillion units if they did, but they never will. So Walksnail, good on you. You got the market corner for that one. And if DJI ever does it, now I'm going to take the credit for the idea because I said it officially in a video and I will link it to their product page. I guarantee you I'll do it just to tell them I said it first. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for hanging in there for my opinions and my hot takes about the Avatar Caddx Walksnail VRX add-on to your goggles system. Now, remember, this was not the full Avatar goggle system, and it's not a full Avatar system review. That is still forthcoming. I will be making a full Avatar system review after I spend a lot more time with it, tried a few more firmware updates, and tried some other VTX camera combinations. Once I get well-rounded in it, there will be a full review, but this was just my initial thoughts, opinions, and hot takes for you. And let me know in the comments below what your initial thoughts, opinions, and hot takes are. And if you'd like to know more about the Avatar system, head on over to my Discord and ask us some questions. There's a growing community of people over there willing to talk to you about the weirdness of FPV and everything digital if you feel like it. There's also a boatload of analog pilots, HD0 pilots, and every other kind of pilot you could think of because it's a nice, diverse, friendly community to ask your questions to. That's what I was going for there. And we'd love to have you there and talk about the Walksnail VRX if you're into that kind of thing. So come chill on the bacon corner. And until next time, stay greasy. And I'll catch you later. We've been together these last few weeks, and I can't say it's been great. I'm sorry. I have really tried. It's not me. It's you. I just don't think you're in a place right now where we can have this kind of committed relationship. I'm sorry. I think we should see other goggles. I want to see other goggles, but keep my phone number. Let's stay friends. And then maybe we'll see where life takes us. And down the road, maybe the time will be right. But no, don't cry. It's okay. Like I said, it's not me. It's definitely you.